Okay, Katie, we got this question so many times that I'm just going to ask it to you. How did you keep a straight face during your famous Sarah Palin interview?
Welcome back to Hysteria, where we have the best listeners. Listeners, we know you're just as excited as I am to have Katie on the podcast this week, so we thought this would be a great opportunity to bring you guys in. We put the call out for questions, and we're going to answer them now. Also, the omniscient voice you hear asking us questions is our producer, Caroline Reston. Caroline, take it away.
I wanted to write in that copy, the godlike voice you're hearing is our producer,
That's
Caroline.
Voice of God. Voice of God.
Okay, so our first question is, when and how did you two first meet?
Katie, do you remember? I do.
Oh, was it when I came to the Obama headquarters in New York?
Yep.
When I was anchoring the CBS Evening News, I knew I had to go and suck up to you people so I could try to get an interview with then candidate or then Senator Obama. And it was really fun because there were so many, just great young people who were just working away. I think I met you there, Alyssa, right?
We did. And my parents were so excited because Katie Couric, the Katie Couric. And my mom was like, my mom goes, why did you wear horizontal stripes? And so that was the takeaway. And she doesn't listen to this podcast, so she won't be mad at me.
That is so funny. Is your mom very critical?
I mean, she's my mom.
Okay, enough said. Okay, Caroline.
Katie, you are also currently wearing horizontal
Not in the same way. Not in the same way.
Like...
Mine were very different.
So our next question is, having a crush on a guy when we're both middle-aged just feels so embarrassing, LOL. That said, I'd love to hear what you've enjoyed the most about falling in love as grown-ass adults.
Okay, do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
You go first.
So I would say the thing about it is that I liked myself and I was very aware of who I was when I met David. And so he got the real me. He got 100%. This is how I am. I didn't put on any airs for him. I didn't try to be, cuter than I was or funnier than I was. It was just me. And so I feel like we had a great foundation because there was none of the when you're younger, I feel like you're just not as secure. And so I was like, either he likes me for me or he doesn't. And he did. And now he's having shoulder surgery tomorrow and I'm going to have to take care of him.
Tell me, what does David do?
We met, Katie, because he was Harry Reid's chief of staff when Reid was leader.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that's how we met.
How long have you been together?
14 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, 14 years, married for 10.
Oh, that's so nice. My story is very similar, actually, Alyssa. I think, my husband died when I was 41 and he was 42. And we had two little girls, Ellie and Carrie, and they were 6 and 2 when he died. And I took a couple years to start dating and I went out and had some long-term relationships. Fun, but ultimately not for the long run. And I think I was 55 and I was always very intentional about dating. I always knew I loved being married. I love having a partner. I'm not saying everyone needs one to be happy and fulfilled. I don't believe that. But for me personally, I love the companionship of a partner. And so when I met my current and hopefully last husband, John Molnar, I was very much comfortable in my own skin and very much myself as well. Because I was, at 55, you better start to get comfortable with who you are. Right. So he kind of liked me. He got, the whole thing, he got the true me too. And that's why I think I got the true him, I think. So that isn't a very good story though.
No, it is. No, but I think it is because there is when you're younger, you're still figuring out who you are. And then
I also was insecure. I think I was insecure and
I was,
and I think I dated a couple of guys who played games, and I didn't like that at all, who were, I never knew kind of where they stood. And I always felt like uneasy and off balance, right? And when you find someone and you can really be who you are, your true self, and they love you for warts and all, it is so liberating. And, it's someone you can feel 100% comfortable with. And like, even if you're going to be an asshole one day, or even if you're going to do something weird, you know that there's something deep, deep, and a foundation of love that can get you through all those rocky times. Don't be embarrassed to have a crush on someone. It's so fun.
I agree.
Those early weeks and months of a relationship, because let's face it, things do get a little more normalized through the years, but it's so fun. There's nothing like it, and enjoy it. Enjoy it. Don't be embarrassed. And also make sure that person likes you for the right reasons, just like David and John like us for the right reasons.
That's great advice. Also, to plug Alyssa's book, Who Thought This Was a Good Idea? Her beginning of her love story with her husband is very, very sweet.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to read your book,
Thanks,
Alyssa.
Caroline. I'll send you a copy.
Yeah, and by the way, have you read my book, Alyssa?
I interviewed you, Katie. I read your book twice. I read your book twice and have so many Post-it notes in it. I also listened to the audiobook. So you just sit back down.
That's hardcore. I forgot you interviewed me. Sorry, I don't even remember what I had for breakfast. By the way, Caroline has beautiful teeth.
Thank you so much.
This is the most fun episode ever.
I've been told that a lot, and not to brag, but I think it's because I've recently learned I have an unusually large mouth. So a lot of my teeth show.
Oh, yeah, your teeth show.
Yeah, they do
just really show.
They're lovely,
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for my mom for paying for my braces. Okay, so next question. I think there has been a lot of talk about risk, and I think women tend to particularly be risk averse because we experience disproportionate low back. I don't know what that means, but
blowback.
Blowback.
Oh, blowback. Okay, that makes sense. It says low back here. I don't know. Maybe that was an expression I just didn't know. What is a risk you're glad you took and a risk that paid off? What is a risk you're glad you took even though it didn't work out? And how did that inform your approach to making choices?
Let's see. A risk I'm glad I took. So when I was in the White House, the position of White House Deputy Chief came available. And Barack Obama and the senior staff were like, Alyssa, you're going to do this. And I was coming up with every other person who I thought should do it because I was nervous to make a mistake. And my boss and mentor and sensei to this day, Pete Rouse, called me into his office and he said, God damn it, Alyssa, you're the only one here who thinks you can't do it. You need to shut up and take the job. And I did it. And frankly, I think I was excellent at it. I think I was born for that job. I loved it.
I also think that sometimes, I tell young people, taking a job and doing a job can also be very valuable in that it can teach you what you don't want to do.
Yes.
And who you don't want to be. And so you shouldn't feel like a failure because the job didn't work out. You should just use it as a learning experience. And I think for me, I think a risk I'm glad I took was starting my own media company.
Yeah.
I think I realized, and that came from a risk that I took that I have mixed feelings about. I'm glad I did it in a way, but also sad I did it in a way, which was going to be the anchor of the CBS Evening News. And I think one of the things I have learned, and luckily technology advanced along with me, is that I didn't necessarily want to be controlled by the man or the men who had this ability to make decisions, not always based on merit, right? Mm-hmm. And that I wanted to be the boss of me, that I wanted to lift other people up, give them opportunities, be kind of on the same wavelength as they are. And that's why I'm really happy that I started with my husband a media company, which unfortunately I don't like the name of it, Katie Couric Media, but everyone said, you should take advantage. You should take advantage of the fact that your name is well known. And so, that was hard. And I couldn't have done it without my really smart, business savvy husband. And so I'm really glad. And now we have like 40 employees. We've brought in a lot of revenue. We've done it for 6 years. We're thriving. We're kind of like the little engine that could. And I have the freedom to do things like this, Alyssa, or to just call James Carville and say, hey, will you do an interview with me?
And are you enjoying yourself? You enjoy yourself?
I am.
Yeah,
I
see,
am.
that's the
and
best.
I have so much more flexibility. I'm not going to lie. Like sometimes I miss working for a big news organization, especially like when there's a convention or when there's the Olympics. But, I also am excited to see other people take those opportunities and run with them. So, I think that's a risk that I'm glad I took.
Our next question involves both of your books. Can you both talk about your writing process and balancing vulnerability and funny anecdotes with advice and accounts? How did you develop your author voice and style? And do you plan on writing another book?
I'll start with this one. I basically tried to write the way I think and the way I talk. I had a really wonderful collaborator helping me who I think we had very similar sensibilities. We're about the same age. We came up in the media business around the same time. So I think we had kind of this common historical vocabulary, if you will, about sort of the way things were and the way things have become. So I would basically just write big chunks. I would remember events like when I interviewed Bob Dole, and he got really mad at me when I asked him about tobacco not being addictive and the money he was getting from the tobacco industry. I ended up not keeping that in the book because it was getting too long, but I would really just write things, and then I would look at old speeches, or I never journaled. I'm just not the journaling type, unfortunately. But I would just remember, I do have a good memory, and I was prompted by rewatching interviews I did or setting myself back in time. And there's some things that I think are so crystallized in your memory, it's easy to retrieve them. But I kind of just saw things as chapters in my life.
Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily do it in order, but I would do like, today I'm going to write about when I decided to go to CBS and what that process was like, or when I was pregnant with Ellie and I got offered this job on the Today Show. So I would just kind of write about those things, and then we would weave them together. That's how I did it. How about you, Alyssa?
So when I first started writing my book, the process was awful because I was trying to write a book like a book that had been written before, right? And that's just not who I am. Like a DC, Washington, he's someone who worked in the White House memoir, and I thought it should be serious. And and I'm not serious. That is not why Barack Obama hired me. Like, I am good at my job, but I'm not uptight, I guess. And I was trying to write a book that was coming across as very serious. And so I really struggled. And then, funny enough, through collective bargaining at Vice, I met my co-writer, this woman, Lauren Euler, love you, Lo. And she was exactly what I needed, because she's like, She's like, write down your memory. What are your favorite memories? Your memories will inform certain things. And so I took all this time with note cards, and I wrote down my memories. And then we went back to Hachette, and we were like, actually, this is the book we want to write. And they were like, yes, this is it. Like, I had sent them some versions that I had written, that I had done myself without Lauren's help. And I decided that the best way to get people to want to read my book is to just, in the same way, Katie, that we met our husbands when we were feeling like totally like ourselves, I was like, either I have to be totally myself in this book, I have to tell the horrible story about how I almost shit myself when I met the Pope, about how, of all of the friendships, the things that if anyone was going to buy my book, and I decided who I wanted to write it for, which were people who grew up like I did. My dad worked at IBM. My mom worked at the high school. I had no adjacency to politics. They just basically sent me to college and said, do something you love. And I met Bernie Sanders. And that was, and like, so to just tell people that I took these risks, you know, that I didn't know. I mean, Bernie Sanders was just this man I saw on TV, but he spoke to me. And so I think that like when I wrote the book, I was so proud of it when I was done, because when I read the audiobook, when I was recording it, I was like, this totally sounds like me. Like if someone sat down across the table from me and asked me these questions, this is how I would say it. And funny enough, I couldn't have done that without Lauren, because I kept trying to edit myself and she was like, no, let Alyssa be Alyssa. Like just do it. And that was, so when people read it and they compliment me, I actually take the compliment really seriously because it actually is me.
Yeah. And I think you and I probably were infected by the same disease as women of a certain age. I'm much older than you are, Alyssa, but how old are you, by the way?
I'm 48.
Okay. So I'm almost 20 years older than you are.
Okay.
But I think that we, you know, I think women in the workplace have to try so hard to be taken seriously, right?
Yes.
And that was a dilemma for me my whole life, you know, because I actually am a serious person. I care deeply about issues, but I also have this funny side. And so I think it's so easy, especially when you're a public figure, quite frankly, that people want to put you in a box. You're a serious news person or you're a fluffy morning show host. And I think people have a hard time embracing, you know, we contain the idea of containing multitudes like Walt Whitman talks about. And so I'm sure that you had some of those things in your head when you were writing a book, like I'm writing a policy book. And I did too. Like I wanted to be received as a serious journalist, but I also wanted people to get to know who I was deep down inside. And, you know, I included a lot of things that weren't very flattering about myself, that I felt territorial about my job at times, you know, and that when people came around that I didn't mentor maybe, you know, people who were thrust out there to replace me in my job. And I talked about this whole dilemma with Ruth Bader Ginsburg that got a lot of pushback from journalists. But, you know, I wanted to say everybody has these ethical dilemmas at some point, and journalists have to weigh things all the time. And why not, you know, open the curtain and say, these are some of the things that happen to people, you know, all people. And I remember being interviewed by a writer about the book. And I said, have you ever had kind of an ethical thing? And she said, yeah, I interviewed someone and somebody came out afterwards and said, please don't include that. And I said, did you? And she said, no. So, you know, we struggle with these things. And so I tried to be very vulnerable. Sometimes I feel like maybe I open myself up to too much criticism, but I also wanted to, you know, interrogate things like female competition.
Right.
And what does it look like versus male competition, and do it in a really honest, transparent way.
And that is what I loved about your book and why I read it and also listened to it, because it was complicated, right? You could have done a glossy, distilled, edited to shit book that was like, here's my life as Katie Couric. But you were like, Katie, I laughed, I cried, I read it, and then I was like, that wasn't even enough. I have to listen to it. So to me, it was a 10 out of 10.
Well, thank you. And I think the lesson here from both of our stories is, you know, you have to embrace who you are.
Yeah.
And be radically honest if you want your story to resonate with someone else, because everything else feels, as you said, glossed over and fakey and inauthentic. And I think that's the worst thing to be.
I agree.
That's, you know, who wants that? Who wants to write it and who wants to read it?
I think the answer is Melania Trump there. We have a few more questions for you all. These all lean a little more political, but I will start with an easy one.
Okay.
If you had a chance to interview Ivanka Trump, what would you ask her?
I think I would ask her, who are you? Like, who are you? Tell us who you are. Like, I would welcome, I don't think it's a question someone would expect. And I would really be interested in what came top of mind.
I think that's a really good question, honestly. I think that's, who are you?
Who are you? Tell us.
I think it would be interesting if she would be honest about why they kind of disappeared from the public eye.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the hardest part of having a father who was president and then was not reelected. I think, I'm not sure, as you know, I said she would be honest in her answer, but I would kind of like to understand her decision to kind of move to Florida, get away from all the people who, you know, who were no longer her friends.
Right.
I get the impression she was sort of shunned by her posse of
her
people.
Society pals.
Yeah. And, you know, just on a human level, what the whole experience was like, which is a little like your question too. Okay. What's next, Caroline?
Okay. I keep hearing about non-traditional media that VP Harris should do. Do you have any ideas for shows you'd like to see her on? I'd love to see her on a cooking show. I will note she was just on RuPaul's Drag Race.
Right.
To me, I think she's doing it. Like, I can't think of something that I haven't seen. You know what I would like to see her do?
Hysteria podcast?
I would like to see Katie interview her. I think that like a real hour-long sit-down, actually, the more traditional, because they're killing it on social media. You know what I mean? Like the Lance Bass, bye, all those things. I mean, if I've seen them, I can't imagine what everybody else is seeing because I'm not even that online. But I actually think I'd like to see her do a full hour sit down with Katie and introduce herself to people who do not know her that well.
I interviewed her in January, and we're reaching out, obviously, to her folks. I'd kind of like to do a day in the life of her campaign and really be a fly on the wall and obviously get a chance to talk to her, but to really see who she is.
Mm-hmm.
I think a sit-down interview wouldn't necessarily reflect or convey her true essence in a way.
No, I think your day in the life is a better idea.
You know, and I think she gets a little tripped up and I think it becomes sort of formal. Mm-hmm. And I would love for to be there when she's meeting with her staff, to be there, you know, when she's going to a campaign rally, to talk to her, to be there when she's talking to President Biden. Maybe something happened in Israel. I don't know. You know, I would love to be a fly on the wall. I don't think she would ever let me,
right?
But I think it would be awesome.
I agree. I think that's the best. I think that would be the best format.
So those both sound like pretty traditional media.
Yeah, because we're basic old bitches, Caroline.
I guess it does. But I mean, she did an interview with me and we put it in our newsletter and on social media and on YouTube. So that's kind of non-traditional. And, you know, I think I'm a little burned by President Biden doing like Conan O'Brien and Howard Stern. And I think those are great as long as you don't do it, as long as you don't avoid serious interviews. Not that they weren't serious, but they really weren't very policy oriented. And they were more kind of like origin story stuff. And I think that she needs to do some fun things, but I really, really hope won't shy away from doing big interviews with the New York Times, with the Wall Street Journal, you know, with network news anchors, with former network news anchors, because I think, you know, honestly, not everyone can do an interview and not everyone understands public policy. And I'm not saying I'm like this public policy wonk, but, you know, we need people who know how to ask important, serious questions and follow up.
I agree with that.
Okay, here's an interesting question. Given the GOP's clear goal to make America Gilead again, if we hold the White House, could it be possible / beneficial to create a secretary or director of reproductive rights and maternal affairs?
Sure. Absolutely. It could be a White House position. It could be at HHS. There are like a lot of places that position could live. And I do think specifically about maternal mortality, it is something that needs to be addressed. America's like a third world nation.
It's terrible in that department. Also paid family leave. My friend Reshma Sujani has done incredible work in that area. There are other people who are working on it and organizations. I think she was just elated that a question was asked about that in the CNN debate. Not that they really answered it, but, I think that this will usher in a new era of people caring more deeply about women and women's issues and family issues, which are really not women's issues. So I think that's a really good idea. And I'd like to nominate the person who came up with it.
Yes, exactly. Send us your resume. We'll send it in.
Okay, Katie, we got this question so many times that I'm just going to ask it to you. How did you keep a straight face during your famous Sarah Palin interview?
I very consciously went into that interview knowing that people who supported her, and she was an incredible candidate, incredibly charismatic initially. I mean, she just blew the lid off the RNC with that speech. And my friend Nicole Wallace was helping her, and signs were blocking the teleprompter. She ad-libbed that lipstick on, what's the difference between a soccer mom and
hockey mom
and a pit bull lipstick. So I just knew that she was pretty light. I didn't know she was light on public policy, but I knew that hadn't really been properly mined. I guess Charlie Gibson had done something, but there was plenty of wood to chop. And I knew that people would blame me for being too confrontational or aggressive or whatever. I went in there saying, I am not going to look at her askance. I'm not going to smirk. I'm not going to look condescending, that I am just going to have no expression at all, because I knew people would blame me if she didn't have the right answer or stumbled or whatever. So, and also as a person, I also felt bad for her, because I saw it was pretty evident. And also her speaking cadence, I think, made it almost exacerbated the situation. But it was pretty evident that she wasn't quite ready for prime time and that she was struggling. And if you're in a situation like that, you feel bad, unless you have ice water running through your veins. So I would never have laughed or embarrassed her further. She was honestly, she was doing it herself by kind of throwing in everything but the kitchen sink when she answered some questions. So for those reasons, I just didn't want to react to anything she said.
It's a great answer, actually. Okay, 2 more questions. The first is, I never thought about it before, but I guess the Summer Olympics are always the same year as a presidential election. How does that affect a campaign, having the Summer Olympics always during the same year?
I'm going to give you my reflection on this was in 2008. It was Beijing, Katie, right?
Right.
2008. And the Crooked family will know the name Ben Rhodes, of course. And Ben Rhodes and I used to check in every morning about what had happened on the Olympics. It was actually the most, August is a grind. You still have, July and August, there's still so much time left on the campaign. I mean, not really in Kamala's case, but for us, and everything was just, we were so tired. And the Olympics brought us such joy. I would pretend to do a dismount or stick the landing in front of Ben's desk. And it was just, I loved it. I think we should always have this, because there is something about American excellence, right? We're watching the Olympics now and I'm just fuck, this is great. I don't know. I find it is nothing but upside, I feel like.
I also have been struck by the diversity at the Olympics.
Yes.
I've also been struck by the diversity at the Olympics when DEI has suddenly become a dirty word.
Yep.
You look at the U.S. gymnastics team and they look like America.
Yes.
And I saw a post that was done by the NAACP of a little 5-year-old. on a balance beam at her home. I think she was doing things, and how inspired she was. She was little black girl. And I was like, representation matters so, so, so much. And I feel like we've seen a sea change in representation in the best possible way. And I think it's so thrilling. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know, to me, the Olympics are emblematic of this is our country. And mm-hmm. Isn't it fucking great?
Yes. This year.
That's what I think. I think we're reminded like we're all from different backgrounds and different countries and, and came from different places. And some of us are immigrants and some of us are from mixed race families. And isn't it great? Mm-hmm. Isn't it a beautiful thing? And in terms of messing with the election, that was just sort of my personal observation this year. It's just a lot of work because, I'm thinking about people like Savannah Guthrie, who, she's in Paris and then she'll be in Chicago and she'll be like I've got to switch gears pretty quickly. It's just a very intense period. And, shout out to everybody who's working their butts off covering both these events.
This is a fun final question. Can we let ourselves dream for a moment and discuss what it would be like to have a woman as president?
Yes, we can.
I don't even know if we can. It's so funny because after 2016, you're like, I don't know, can't get ahead of myself, can't get too excited. But, it's not dissimilar. Oh, my God, what if I cry? It's not dissimilar to what Katie was just saying about the Olympics. It's like, and the little girl on the balance beam. It's like, if you can see it, you can dream it. And when we were in the White House, there is a very famous picture, Katie, I know you'll know it, of a little boy touching President Obama's hair. And the point of that picture, which stayed up in the West Wing all 8 years, was that the little boy couldn't believe the president had the same hair he did. And to me, that's like what we're waiting for in a woman president. To be like, you know what? There might be tampons in the White House. Like they're like all of the things that someone who's had some sort of lived experience that's adjacent yours is good enough to be the leader of the free world. And I think that so much will change in how we see ourselves when that happens. Even if intellectually we tell ourselves we are equal, we are worthy, all of this, I think seeing, if we're able to see Kamala up outside the Capitol in January, that will be a moment that we can't even imagine right now sitting here. That's how I feel.
And I think it is, for a woman of my generation, born in 1957, as I mentioned, I'm 67 now. My daughters are 33 and 28. We used to have T-shirts, I think from like Margaret from Dennis the Menace saying, I want to be the first female president. I don't know if you remember those.
I do remember Dennis the Menace.
Yes. And it is something that we have fantasized about truly. Mm-hmm. And I think, we have to be able to imagine it and envision it. And I really think it's not only that Kamala Harris is a woman. I think that she's a mixed race woman. Mm-hmm. I think that she's a younger woman and, represents generational change.
Yep.
I was talking to somebody not too long ago, and this was when I was on the Today Show with Bryant Gumbel. And it was, I guess, in 1992 when Bill Clinton won. Mm-hmm. And to see Hillary and Bill and Tipper and Al, all I think in their mid 40s, right?
Yeah.
Back then, it was like, wow. And with Fleetwood Mac singing Don't Stop Thinking About Tomorrow, it did represent a new era and new hope and a sea change. I felt the same way, obviously, when President Obama was elected president and came out with Michelle and their two girls. There was just something so beautiful and exquisite about that moment, right? It represented the possibility of America. Yeah. So I think we can imagine it, and I think it's incredibly exciting. And I think there is a lot of work to do. and a lot of people to be brought along and a lot of understanding. I wish, I wish there could be more understanding between people who are not like-minded, and more honest conversations, because I don't like the current climate and the hate and vitriol that seems to be coming too often from both sides. So, but anyway, I think it's really, an exciting moment in my lifetime and in the lifetime of our country.